Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Veg Networking Canada. It's important for all of us to honor, acknowledge, and respect that many of us are located on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of many Indigenous peoples of Canada. Veg Networking Canada is a community where vegan plant-based companies connect and collaborate. Today, we have a special guest with us who is a champion for calm, confidence, and connection, an advocate for healing patterns of generational trauma for parents and children. She carries with her vast cultural experiences abroad and in Canada. Veg Networking Canada is pleased to introduce the founder of Evolved Connections Global. Welcome, Keyra Conlinn.
Thank you. Thank you for having me today, Justin and everyone.
Yeah, so speaking of everyone listening, we're interested to hear about your own personal vegan plant-based origin story and how that unfolded for you.
Certainly, it's been a bit of a scattered one. So I actually gave up red meat when I was 18, which was quite some time ago. And then in 2010 and then 2012, I started having some more serious health issues. And through that time, I found out that I shouldn't be eating dairy and gluten and other things. And through my health journey of recovering, I started to recognize how I was affected by other meat and fish as well. And I had been long kind of felt called to give those up as well. But where I was in other countries, it really was a bit of a challenge to do so. So I returned to Canada in 2018, and that's when I got to finally make that decision and fully go vegan. So I've been fully vegan for 5 years now.
Incredible, awesome. Time flies when you're having fun, as they
Yeah, for sure.
say. So speaking about having fun, it's not always fun when it comes to entrepreneurship. It can be difficult and challenging and fun and all the things. So can you tell everybody a little bit more about your entrepreneurial story and how that started for you? Is it the current business you have now or multiple businesses before? What does that look like?
Sure. They're actually connected stories because in 2012, when I was having my health issues, I had to stop working full time because I couldn't cope with that and physically. And so I started to teach online because my background is in English language teaching. So I started to teach online. And at the time, I ended up moving to Amsterdam in the Netherlands. And I also started a group, which at that time I called Dare to Be Global. And I was leading workshops and discussion groups on cultural awareness. And so it's kind of started out in both of those avenues. So for the teaching and the cultural awareness, through those work though, what's fun about that job of teaching English is that we often could talk about life when you're doing it one to one rather than being in a classroom and you're focused on those grammar and vocabulary skills. So it really allowed me to develop my coaching as well. During that time, I also did a variety of different leadership and coaching training and experiences. And I've just over the last few years since COVID hit, other things have come up in my family history and a journey here. You know, the weight of what the world went through, and I just realized I need to move away from teaching in that regard and move more into what for me has always been my heart passion, and that is to help children to not feel isolated like I did when I was very small because my parents just, you know, they didn't have the skills like many parents don't to deal with trauma or to deal with change, to deal with differences, to understand and ideas about parenting, you know, quite different back then. So I have moved into the work that I'm doing now, which is helping parents, especially entrepreneurial single parents who've come out of toxic relationships, to help both themselves and their children to heal. I'll get into more of that as we continue our discussion. So that's where I am now.
Incredible. Yeah. Well, let's continue that discussion in terms of this industry that you're in, working with. You said entrepreneurial focused parents, maybe even single parents with children looking to heal not only themselves but their children. So, in that industry, what are some trends or maybe transformations that you have come across that you're sort of filling that gap for?
What I've seen from people that I've worked with or I've talked to is kind of two situations often arise in the dynamics of the relationships. One, when the parent comes out of a toxic relationship, they're either so drained, their nervous system, their self emotional regulation is so shot themselves that they're focusing on their own healing and trying to start a new life and take care of their child, and they hold the belief that children are resilient and the children seems to be fine. The children seem to be fine. And so the focus is only on the parent. Or the parent is so focused on the child, thinking, what if I let my child go through? What's the consequences for my child? I got to get my child help. And they're not realizing they need to do the work for themselves, and that's going to have a huge impact on their child. So what I see missing is that help being offered concurrently. So parents being able to learn key points of how they can heal concurrently with their child. So there's things that they can do separately and things that they can do together. So they're both on a healing journey. They're walking kind of side by side, as opposed to one being focused on and the other kind of left to the side.
Yeah, it sounds like you're spotting transformation towards like a symbiotic support system, I guess you could say.
Yeah, their growth, simultaneous growth. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So, why don't you walk us up to speed with Evolved Connections Global sort of start to where we are today? Because the next question is, where are you and your business going in the future? So, helping everybody listening get up to speed on where you're at today helps as a springboard to answer that question in terms of where you're headed in the future.
Sure. So I'm going to start by actually correcting that name. So the name which you see on my LinkedIn is the what work I was doing more with and teachers and people who are adapting to other cultures. Whereas the business that I'm moving forward with in now is actually called Light the Way Leadership. And it centers on the idea that parents need to be a lighthouse for their children rather than trying to captain their child's ship, which you see happening very often. So that's going to change. So as far as what's going forward, we change rebranding with that, both on my LinkedIn and starting to redirect that as well with my Instagram and other channels. And then moving forward is I will be offering services to work not only consulting with the parent, but also to be able to go into the home as this is my friend Keyra, so to speak, and play that role where I can observe them in their natural environment and see the dynamics that are happening between them. That way I can be able to best advise what's going to support their growth, and hopefully to start sharing and making a difference in a lot of people's lives.
Love that name, Light the Way Leadership, and the whole like visual of the lighthouse and everything totally makes sense. Now, so it sounds like the future is maybe not moving completely away from online, or maybe you are, I don't know, but it sounds like moving towards that real sort of in-person connection. Is that how it's going to go?
I definitely want a hybrid. Yes, I very much relate. I want to be able to have that experience with the children as well. And so that kind of thing would be in person, the consulting with the parents in between, and it will be online. And if there are people that are not in the Vancouver region, that will obviously be online. So who knows, in the future, they could have some opportunities for travel to go working with people. And so it will be a hybrid.
Wonderful,
Yeah.
wonderful. So, Keyra, the next question, we always preface by telling folks there's no right or wrong answers. You might answer it from what your company does from a company level, or it might literally just be what you do personally, and that might be, it's completely different to everybody. The question is around giving back and charity. So it's sort of like, what does giving back and charity mean to you, maybe conceptually, and or what are you doing to give back, maybe to your local community or abroad?
That's a wonderful question, and it's extremely important. Community is one of the key components, the pillars of what I do when I work with people. Giving is also something that's extremely helpful for people who are trying to overcome trauma because it puts the focus on what they're still capable of doing. For myself, I'm very much, besides the vegan lifestyle, very much into sustainability and the gift economy. So I am an admin of my neighborhood local Buy Nothing project group. And so I host events like clothing, we don't call them swaps because anybody can take, even if they're not giving. So I call my clothing giveaway days. After those events, I bring the remaining clothes to organizations at like the Wish in the downtown East Side, or other types of charities, some that help, refugee families that are resettling and need clothing. I also organize our community giveaway day, which essentially is kind of like a yard sale without the selling. So they can kind of anybody can go around and take what they need from what people are putting out. And I really encourage as well with the people I work with, how it's so impactful for the environment, but also helpful for the budget when people are starting over. So my giving is really bringing awareness to opportunities that are out there for reducing consumerism and also to supporting those in need when we have things we no longer need.
Yeah, yeah. So is that passion and interest in sustainability how vegan weaves itself into your business, or is there something else maybe that you want to share?
It's something that just hit me from a younger age. Like I said, I stopped eating red meat at 18, and that was environmentally based at that time. I've come from small towns, and they're not. There was no talk of vegans at that time. My family is completely, meat eating, and so I am the far from the norm. And so I've just always, I think, well, part of it, I mean, I've come from the generation where parents are like, turn off the lights, turn off the water. But for my own self, I've just I've always felt very connected to nature. And it's just such a source of peace for me that I simply want to do what I can to reduce my impact on it in that regard. And as far as how it weaves into my business, I do know for my own sake the impact that nutrition and clean eating can have on your emotional state. So, people who are trying to recover physically and emotionally from various forms of trauma and situations, it just makes such a difference, both, oh gosh, at just every level to be having a diet that is more plant-based, even if they're not yet ready or willing or interested in going fully vegan, but to be living more plant-based. For children especially, to cut out, I call the crap, the carbonated, refined, artificial, and processed foods. It really, sometimes I work with parents and I'm like, I've tried everything, while I watch them feed things for their children that are full of sugar and chemicals. And I'm like, clearly that is not the case yet. So that's kind of how it weaves into my business. Both, I love to share cooking, and I love to share meals. That's part of my East Coast. I'm actually from Nova Scotia culture. It's not, hey, how are you going? First question after that is, are you hungry? So food is really a passion for me as well. So I love to be able to help introduce people to other healthy yet still tasty ways of eating. So that kind of plays into them being able to take care of themselves and their kids.
That's very powerful, and you bring up an interesting point too, for maybe people who are, like you said, like not yet vegan. Listening, just because something's vegan does not mean that it's healthy, and so you bring up an interesting point about even just like you said, like one parameter or one indicator, like the gut health of the parent or the child and how that
Yeah.
affects the brain and all of that. And furthermore, very interesting your passion about the environment and outside, because people listening can probably just think like how powerful that would be, or how powerful it is when parents are interacting in nature with their children, and how that just helps boost the connection or the healing, or whatever they might be trying to sort of solve for. So that's very interesting. So in terms of resources that might be websites, books, podcasts, who knows, right? So many different resources that we have access to these days. So whether it's related to your work directly or plant-based veganism or even something completely out of left field, are there any resources that you want to share with everybody listening that they may not have heard of before that they can take a look or listen to?
Sure. I'll start by sharing a few books. Um, One book that had an impact on me when I was younger and really kind of helped me get through a lot of troubling or trying times is Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. It just holds the truth of how we always have an element of control in that we have the power to choose, even if it's only the power to choose how we think, and that can really help people. I also follow Abraham through Hicks, through Esther Hicks, now that Jerry Hicks is no longer with us. This is one of their earlier books, and it's a really, really, really important book. Can be very empowering for people who are trying to come back to that sense of themselves. And if it's okay, I'd like to actually read a quote from Khalil Gibran's The Prophet. So this is something that really speaks to my approach to children and to parenting. So it's in The Prophet, and it's his little section called On Children. And a woman who held a babe against her bosom said, speak to us of children. And he said, your children are not your children. They are the sons and daughters of life's longing for itself. They come through you, but not from you. And though they are with you, yet they belong not to you. You may give them your love, but not your thoughts, for they have their own thoughts. You may house their bodies, but not their souls, for their souls dwell in the house of tomorrow, which you cannot visit, not even in your dreams. For you may strive to be like them, but seek not to make them like you. For life goes not backward, nor tarries with yesterday. You are the bows from which your children, as living arrows, are sent forth. So that for me is inspiration, and behind what I do. As far as who do I listen to, or as far as like podcasts or you watching them on YouTube and such. Dr. Gabor Mate is somebody I go to for inspiration on trauma and healing, as well as Dr. Shafali, who is very recognized for her work with helping parents and children to find some connection again. So those are a few people I can recommend in a couple of books.
Amazing. Now, just like not to put you on the spot too much, but your journey as it goes to veganism, right, started when you came back to Canada in 2018. Were there any resources that people might be like listening to what you're saying and really in tune, but again, not vegan, but interested maybe in like resources that helped somebody like you?
Yeah, sure. So at that time, I was listening to getting some inspiration from Medical Medium and following some of the protocols. So that also gave me some recipe ideas and ways to like other ideas about food combining and principles of eating and such like that. Nowadays, I also follow on Instagram somebody called the Smile Enthusiast, who's on a goal to be like the oldest person ever through her health journey, as well as Misfit Vegan, who's a raw vegan. And they carry with them great energy and great ideas. And Raw Food Romance is also somebody who offers really great recipes and ideas and things for using different types of things besides, his juicers and blenders, but also dehydrators and how to make interesting treats, but in simple ways. So those are really
Cool, very cool. Thank you so much. And for those listening who might not be watching, that second book recommendation, the title of that book was Ask and It Is Given.
Yeah.
Great. So we have a question that came in, and that question is, are you a parent? And if so, how has that experience informed your work?
Great question. I'm not a parent right now. That is a decision that I made based on my life experiences and needing my own healing. I've worked with children my entire life. My mother was a childcare childcare giver. So from a young age, I was the secondary caregiver. In addition to my brothers, we sometimes had up to 4 other children in the house. From there, I've worked with children from my teenage years in not just from teaching later on, but also general childcare before and after school programming, sports coaching, et cetera, et cetera. So my journey has been supporting others and their children.
Well, there's no doubt about it. Just it's obvious they're the future, and so more resources, more focus, more time and attention, and compassion, connection, and all of that needs to be focused and shared on them. So that's great. So
it is. I just want to add that it's
yeah,
also, through my experiences living abroad, been very enlightening to see as well the differences in parenting. What we take for granted as our normal obviously isn't in many other cultures. There are things where I can say children are children, and there are other things where I see that we underestimate what children are capable of. And so that really has given me a different perspective as well when working with people, because I've seen how parenting happens in a variety of different countries and cultures.
yeah, that's powerful. We so underestimate what children are capable of.
Mm-hmm.
Incredible. So, in terms, you've mentioned in those resources, clearly those are sources of inspiration, but that is the next question. And again, it's kind of like the giving back question. It's, maybe there's going to be direct people or organizations or nature itself that's like an inspiration to you, not to put words in your mouth, but also you might answer it from like, what does inspiration actually mean to you from more of like a conceptual or philosophical level? But yeah, that's the question. Like, what is inspiration and what does it mean to you?
Inspiration for me, one can come simply, as you said, from seeing something that's inexplicable or seeing like in nature. We see something and we're just like, how is this? How does it just happen? You think, how did this come to this point, to make this happen? So for one element, it is just being open to awe in observation in the world around us, and also in what people are capable of. See the marvels that have been created, invented, um, designed. I'm very much into various forms of expression, and to see the way that what comes through people, because that's how I really see art in forms of creation. It's coming through them. I often look at that with awe as well. But when it comes to people, for me, what's inspiring is those that hold on to love, um, despite circumstances around them that would really take it away from other people. That would really kind of make other people feel dark or maybe disheartened and cynical. But those people who are able through despite what is being brought against them, to be able to stay connected to love, for me, that's inspirational and aspirational.
Very nice. Holding on to love and being open to awe, both like nature and with people, and you know, incredible, incredible. All right, Keyra. So we're already at the last sort of conversation starter, which is when people sometimes hear like, "Hey, do you have any advice?" People don't like framing it that way. Some people do, some people don't. So alternatives to that, synonyms to that, like any lessons, tips, wisdom, advice, or anybody in the entrepreneurial field, maybe even speaking to your client base. You might be speaking to people who, like you said, are in a toxic relationship, might be out of one. You might be speaking to people who are already entrepreneurs, or maybe they are working a 9 to 5 and have this, I think you called it I forget what you said, like a heart passion or a heart business. They might have that in their mind's eye and want to do it, but not there yet, kind of thing. So just really open-ended catch-all, any tips, wisdom, lessons, or advice for lots of different people.
So my first suggestion for entrepreneurs who are currently still working and they feel that call to be doing something else, there's some that are just maybe having the beginning of that pull. Don't jump until you give yourself time for clarity. As well as, I know for myself, I've been in different positions where in the work world, which are really disheartening. The best thing I can say in that regard, is to find gratitude where you are, because that's the energy that's going to help you go to where you want to be. because otherwise it's like that old quote of no matter where you go, there you are. So if you hold that energy in your current position and you still have that energy, when you leave that position, you're going to carry it into the next position. So if you are starting out and you're thinking of leaving, enjoy where you are, find benefit to it while you are looking for clarity. And the other thing is to connect to other people. Secondarily, is if you are considering to be an entrepreneur in whatever kind of business, join some networks and start meeting entrepreneurs. Even if you're just, it's a concept for you, it'll help you to really tease out the focus that you really want to take on and how you really want to impact people. So in the business aspect, that's my advice. When it comes to parents and who are considering what they can do for their children, first thing they can do is to realize that the children need them to take care of themselves. Often I think, I give my children everything. I give them me. I give them my life. I don't do this. And I'm like, that is actually not the end all be all. And in fact, it can have a negative impact because a child needs to be able to have their own independence as well, and to not feel the burden of your life is surrounded, is focused on them. Because they can take that on. We underestimate how much children take on from a young age. I've seen 2-year-olds choosing not to see somebody because they feel that their parent feels, uncomfortable with that other person, even though it's a family member and they haven't done anything to the child will respond. Children pick up on more than we realize energetically, even from such a young age. So it's really important to consider that we need to have some individuation. While I say they're going to be healing together, there is a distinct separation between the two, because that's what's healthy, and they are not us and we are not them. So that's my advice there, to consider not putting your everything, because if you put your everything, then you have nothing for yourself, and they need you to be strong. So.
Wow, great. Both different, but both great. And it sounds like a lot of your work is helping bring to light blind spots that are centered around like unintended consequences. You're doing this.
It really is, yeah. And there's a lot of things that I worked with one mom, and she was like, "Why can't I get my kids to be passionate and to know that they should follow their dreams?" And I'm like, what do they see you doing in that energy that you're talking to me with right now? And she's like, and I'm like, okay, well, you're asking them to do something they're not seeing you do yourself. And they're like, okay, let's give that a shot. So it's amazing how the simplest things can just slip, our view.
Yeah, it's very clear through this conversation today, and probably for everybody watching and listening, that you definitely are operating more as like a Sherpa or a guide, rather than somebody telling people what to do, but like helping them see themselves, right? Which is any kind of coach or teacher, is the great ones at least are not telling people what to do, but bringing the best out of others. So that's amazing. So before we let people know where they can find you on Instagram, of course, and we'll give the spelling of your name, they can find you on LinkedIn as well. Is there anything in this conversation today that has come up that you want to go back to, or maybe anything that we missed, or any type of announcements, kind of like open floor for you before we end your session?
I just want to express gratitude for having me on, for letting me share, for being part of this network, and for doing what you do. And I think I'm just really, really in a space of gratitude. I just love that this is available, and I am open to questions. So I hope anybody watching, feel free to reach out and see how I can support you.
Amazing. Awesome. So speaking of where you can reach out and get connected with Keyra, the spelling of her name, you'll see it if you're on YouTube in the show notes. First name is Keyra, Keyra. Last name is Conlinn, Conlinn, Keyra Conlinn. So you can find her on Instagram. I'm probably not very many
No.
Keyra Conlinn spelled this way. So you can find her on LinkedIn, and then on Instagram, it's at Keyra_Conlinn. So you can find out more and connect with her there. So everybody, thank you so much for your time today. This has been another episode of Veg Networking Canada with the founder of Light the Way Leadership, Keyra Conlinn. Thank you so much, everybody. We'll catch you soon for another episode of Veg Networking Canada. Until then, take care. Bye for now.